Chapter 11. Tire Advertising. It was also my lot to pioneer tire advertising. Tires had been advertised somewhat since bicycle days, but with scarcely more than a name. The Goodyear Company had for many years been customers of our agency. I believe that their expenditure never exceeded $40,000 per year. Nobody suspected that tires could be popularized. One day it occurred to us that we could increase our advertising business by increasing accounts on our books. Thereafter, that became our dominant principle. Along those lines, we grew to be one of the largest agencies in the world. Commissions to advertising agents are paid by the publishers, not for changing accounts from one agency to another, but for increasing the volume of advertising. We should earn our pay. One way is by seeking and developing new advertising opportunities. Another is by making it possible for existing advertisers to multiply expenditures. I have rarely taken an account from another advertising agent. I have never tried to do so, save where a big opportunity was being spoiled by wrong methods. Nearly all my large accounts have been one of my own creation. I have started with small sums sometimes and made the advertising grow out of earnings. Such developments form the real satisfactions of advertising. The Goodyear people, after much persuasion, were induced to enlarge their expenditure. For the first season, they gave us $200,000. It seemed to them a reckless amount. They were then pioneering what they called the straight side tire. I had heard about it, but did not know what it was. Ads about it had been frequently coming to my desk. I was interested both in tires and in advertising, but was never enough impressed to learn what straight side meant. I asked them about it, and they showed me the difference between straight side and clincher tires. I asked the reason for that difference. They told me the straight side would not rim cut, and that type of construction had, size for size, 10% greater air capacity. Then why, I asked, don't you emphasize those results? Results are what men are after. They care not how you get them. That was a new idea to them. They were manufacturers, interested mainly in a type of construction. Being interested in manufacturing details, they naturally talked them to the public. There lies the chief reason why no manufacturer should ever conduct his own advertising. Few attempt it now. The advertiser is too close to his factory. His own interests tend to blind him to the interests of his customers. He fails to appreciate the consumer side. He tells of the things he takes pride in, his methods and processes, the size of his plant, the age of his business, etc. The advertising man must study the consumer and tell what he wants to know. I coined the name No Rim Cut Tires. Across every ad, we ran the heading, No Rim Cut Tires, 10% oversize. The results were immediate and enormous. Sales grew by leaps and bounds. Goodyear tires soon occupied the leading place in tiredom. Another result was to force all rivals to this type of tire. In 2 or 3 years, the time came when Goodyear, on that point, could not claim advantage. So we gradually reduced the name No Rim Cut and featured the name Goodyear. By that time, however, we had another talking point even more impressive. That was the sensational growth in demand. We featured it in pictures and in type until it seemed that the whole motor world was turning to Goodyear tires. That is, in most lines, a great selling argument. People follow the crowds. It is hard for them in most things to analyze reasons and worth, so they accept the verdict of the majority. We did another thing there through a name. We called the anti-skid tread all-weather. We figured out what claim could count most and made the name imply it. So the name told our main story. It formed an ad in itself. Our main purpose then was to induce motorists to use this type of tire on all wheels in all weathers. That has since become the custom, largely through that influence. There is a great advantage in a name that tells a story. The name is usually displayed. Thus, the right name may form a reasonably complete ad, which all who run may read. Coining the right name is often the major step in good advertising. No doubt such names often double the results of expenditures. Consider the value of such names as May Breath, Dynashine, 3-in-1 Oil, Palmolive Soap, etc. Another problem we had to solve was to get dealers to carry tire stocks. Few of them did so in those days. They bought from the Goodyear branches as they sold. We prepared a large newspaper campaign and offered to name in each ad all the dealers who stocked. The minimum requirement was $250 stock. In a few months, we induced some 30,000 dealers to stock Goodyear tires on that basis. And that campaign did much to change the whole complexion of the tire business. This naming of dealers in local advertising is an almost irresistible inducement to stock. Few plans are more effective. No dealer likes to see his rivals named in a big campaign and his own name omitted. The more who join in the plan, the easier it is to get others. I have often secured on new products almost universal distribution in this way. The Goodyear campaign was one of my greatest successes. It placed Goodyear tires in the lead. Never have I met changing situations in more effective ways. The advertising grew from $40,000 to nearly $2 million per year. Still, I lost it. There developed a desire for institutional advertising which I never could approve. It is natural. Great success brings to most men a desire to boast a little. But boasting is the last thing people want to hear. Men like to picture their plants, to tell how they grew, and to preach a little on methods and policies. That may be satisfying, but it isn't salesmanship. No man in advertising or in anything else can afford to offend his own principles. The moment he compromises for money's sake, he is lost. Not as a success, perhaps, but as an artist. As a man who contributes to his profession or calling and brings it to higher levels. There lies the cause of most conflicts in advertising. The layman pays the bills. He naturally assumes the right to dictate. He is not apt to exercise that right in the early stages. The scheme is too new to him. But there comes a time when he feels that he is also an advertising expert. It is curious how we all desire to excel in something outside of our province. That leads many men astray. Men make money in one business and lose it in many others. They seem to feel that one success makes them super businessmen. These men would not venture to dictate to a surgeon, or tell a lawyer how to win a certain case, or an artist how to paint a picture. They recognize technical knowledge in vocations like those, but not in advertising, which seems so simple to them because it aims at simple people. They do not realize that no lifetime is long enough to learn much more than the rudiments. Later I advertised Miller tires. The situation had changed entirely. Buyers in general had come to regard good tires as about alike. It was necessary to upset that impression and to secure a preference in some way. Miller tires were largely used on bus lines on the Pacific Coast. I secured the data and the records. The figures on buses using Miller tires were impressive. The mileage records were surprising. The trend toward Millers in commercial uses was significant. I made those facts the keynote of my campaign. The ordinary tire buyer makes no comparisons. He rarely keeps track of tire mileage. When he does so, it is not done in a scientific way, but he knows that large tire users do not adopt a certain make on guess. I played on that knowledge. I stated in exact figures the results of comparisons. I pictured the trend toward Millers in commercial uses where men knew to exactness what they were doing. I told of the tests made in the Miller factory where great machines wore out all sorts of tires under actual road conditions, how tires were studied which showed the least advantage over Millers. I created the impression, and a right impression, that the Miller people were doing their utmost to secure the maximum tire mileage. That was a short but successful campaign. Our difference there, as in many lines, lay between dealers and consumers. My idea is that we cannot afford to sell anything twice. We cannot spend large sums in expense and concessions in selling our goods to dealers, then spend other large sums in selling for the dealer. The tax is too great on the consumer. We must choose. If a line can be sold by interesting dealers, let the dealer sell. But if we are going to sell our goods for him, we cannot pay him more than the profit of a mere distributor. The greatest calamities in advertising come through doubling the selling expense. The advertiser wins the consumer, and that is expense enough. Then he gives his profits to jobbers and dealers in an effort to interest them. He gives free goods and other costly inducements and gets nothing at all. The dealers and jobbers supply the demand. They become mere order takers. There is one of the greatest questions in merchandising. An unadvertised line without consumer demand must depend on distributors, and they demand a big toll. But however large you make it, somebody else will bid higher. The margin soon diminishes to insignificance. If you are an advertiser creating consumer demand, you must ignore to some extent these intermediary factors. Treat them fairly, but do not pay them for what they cannot do. The jobber will charge you, if you let him, his expensive competition. The dealer will compare your allotted profits with profits on lines he owns. They do not figure that in one case you do the selling, and the other they do it all. Most lines which I have advertised have never employed a salesman. The whole idea has been to win consumers and let them sell to dealers and to jobbers. Those who have tried to sell to consumers, then to dealers and jobbers, have attained prohibitive expense. One must choose. Margins in selling are not sufficient to accommodate both factors.